But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny. And anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time, in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. And loyalty to our conscience and to our God. My allegiance to all three is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation.
Yes, as you say, it was a pretty defiant speech from her, saying essentially that the values of this campaign would continue to be values that she and others should continue to fight for. At times it was also a little bit like a pep talk. She spoke directly to young people, and of course many young people felt energized by the Kamala Harris campaign. Young women, for example, who supported her campaign for reproductive rights to be restored in large parts of the country. And she said to the young people, don't despair. This is not a time to throw up your hands. This is a time that we should be rolling up our sleeves. So she seemed to be trying to reassure the people gathered here that it was going to be okay. And yet at the same time, as we heard in that clip you played, she said, look, if it does turn dark, we're going to light it up with our faith and our service. So it was a long wait for this address from Kamala Harris. She was due to come here to Howard University last night as the results rolled in. She didn't do that as it really started to look like Donald Trump had clinched this election. She came here today, and the tone in many ways was like the campaign speeches I've seen from her over these past 100 days or so. She managed to channel that. She was full of energy, full of enthusiasm. It was a relatively short speech, but she was doing her best to address the sense of despair, of depression, I guess, that's really spreading among her supporters who had hoped that the polls were correct. And in the final days of campaign, we're starting to see signs that perhaps victory might be within grasp. Kamala Harris herself said on the eve of the election that the momentum is on our side. Of course, we now know that that absolutely wasn't the case. A resounding comeback for Donald Trump, who will now enter his second term in the White House.
Yeah, and so there was a real sense of despair among the crowd.
Absolutely, and it does look like the weather's just turning here now, as if to kind of hammer home the point. We had a beautiful balmy evening here in DC last night, and the clouds are just darkening here now. Look, people as they filed in were pretty despondent. A lot of people just didn't really want to talk about it, but a few shared their thoughts. Let's just hear a little of those now.
I had more faith in women collectively, especially white women, to do the right thing by all of us. Because this should have been a landslide victory, and it wasn't.
I'm definitely disappointed, but at the end of the day, I'm super proud of Vice President Kamala Harris, and I'm really just here to show support.
I don't think this had to do with candidate. I think, honestly, any candidate would have, by these margins, any candidate would have lost.
Now, as people filed out after Kamala Harris's speech, many of them seemed quite distraught. We spoke to a few people just briefly there who were really in tears. And of course, a lot of the people who came here today are actually people who've invested a lot in this campaign, people who've given their time either as paid members or unpaid members of this campaign. One woman we had just spoke to just before I came up here said, you know, that they'd essentially been sleeping in the office and that she'd hoped so much that a woman might finally become the leader. And of course, we'll have to see what happens now in terms of these pledges of unity or working towards unity that we're seeing coming from Donald Trump's campaign at this time. Kamala Harris, Joe, in the meanwhile, still has a day job to get back to. She still remains vice president until inauguration on the 20th of January. So she's got to go back and work with Joe Biden, the man who she replaced as the Democratic nominee.